Now, we might just start with introductions if that's okay. So, good morning, and you're also welcome to this funding clinic. I know some of you we see regularly, and it's good to see a lot of new faces as well too, and you're all very welcome. I'm going to introduce my colleague Annie Hanratty, who some of you may know, but she joined.
Oh, sorry, Jenny, you're just mute there. Sorry, that might be me. Hang on, sorry, Jenny, I'll get you off mute there. Hang on. There we go.
Sorry. Um, so Yes, Eileen joined in April earlier this year, so she may have met some of you as she works around the county doing her job and working on the projects, and some of you she may not have met. So it's great to see you all this morning, and thank you for coming. So as you know, every year the local authority is mandated under the Arts Act to offer Arts Act funding and grant schemes for artists and creativity in the local authority region. So for Wicklow, we have three awards and they're very stratified. So we have really good support for artists, Individual Artist Award. We have the Artist in the Community Collaboration Scheme, and then we also have the Artist Festival Award Scheme. So today, Eileen is going to take you through um, how to put your best application forward and how to represent yourself to your best and how to clear down any questions you may have about budgets, about previous work, and how you represent that and how you tie it all together into a coherent, cogent funding application. So I mean, some of you that I've seen on here might have been funded before, and we've had really good projects through other schemes. I see Sarah Webb there, who's been working on a project in Greystones in literature and festivals for children. So projects like that are funded more through the community collaboration scheme. We've individual artists who have possibly received funding before, but some examples of people who would have received that funding, and we would have Joanna Kidney, for example, the really well-known felting and encaustic artist, visual artist in Newtown. Well, she actually lives in Bray now, and she's also on the board of the Mermaid Arts Centre now. And over the years, she would have applied to us for funding applications, and at the moment, she's working on a really large strategic project that she got funding for. Um, some of the festivals that have been funded: West Wicklow Festival, Dunlavin Arts Festival, Bray Jazz Festival. So very different applications, some really community events, some really bespoke visual arts festivals, um, and some really niche music festivals like West Wicklow Music. So we get a real range of application, and I suppose that's what makes it so rich and interesting and diverse. So just a note about the selection process. I'm in this role for about 22 years now, I think this year. So just to reassure people that although the Arts Office receives the applications, that every year there's an independent panel of assessment. And that's to be fair and transparent. And it acknowledges the fact that we may be aware of some of your practices, but there's others we don't know. So to give everybody a clear playing field, we have independent assessors work on all those schemes for us. So that's across the three schemes. They'll be independently assessed. And Eileen's role will be to gather all the data from those applications and put it forward to the panels and manage that process. So I think that's about all I have to say for the moment. Just to, as I said, we know these application processes aren't easy. We know, experiencing positivity is great, but also rejection is difficult. And rebuilding yourself after all these applications, if you haven't been successful, is very difficult, and we acknowledge that. We're lucky in Wicklow that we've a huge cohort of artists and creativity in the community through festivals and other things that are led by really great practitioners, and I suppose that makes the competitive context quite rich. And what I will say as a local authority, we do give more investment to individual artists and awards than most for a county of our size. I think our development programme for artists was over €200,000 last year. So through different schemes, not through these schemes, but through all of our schemes combined, we are a local authority that's very responsive, and has a good amount of funding to offer. So I'll hand you over to Eileen now, and I'll be back at the end to support any questions that you might have. And Eileen will just take through how she's going to manage the clinic. Okay?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Jenny.
Great.
So hopefully everyone can still see the screen okay. I guess this is just to give you a very quick introduction in terms of what we're going to go through. So as I said at the beginning, but I'll repeat for people who have just joined, this session is being recorded and it will be posted on the YouTube channel. If not later on today, definitely first thing tomorrow morning. And I will email everyone who has signed up to the Eventbrite with all of the content, as well as posting it on the Wicklow Arts Office website as well. So those links will be available both for presentation and for the YouTube kind of link for the video recording as well. In relation to this kind of presentation, you're able to see my screen. You shouldn't really be able to see other people's videos. You only really should be able to see mine and Jenny's video. But I can see some of you, so it's nice to see some faces in the crowd. And as Jenny mentioned, she'll be back for the question session later on. So if you do have any questions, do feel free to pop them into the chat box. We're going to hold the questions until the end, but if something does pop into your head as we're discussing things, do certainly put the question into the chat box and kind of have it there. In terms of this overall agenda, sorry, I'm just still letting people in. So if I get distracted, I'm letting people in. In terms of the overall agenda that we're going to go through, a very brief overview of the Arts Act funding opportunities that are available for next year. We'll run through the eligibility as well. I'll offer general kind of tips for application writing. Some of you probably might have heard this from me before or from other people, but just general kind of hints and tips for how to write the application in the best possible way to kind of present yourself and your work. Go through some budgeting, and we have a sample kind of budget template, as well as just some general information as to how to present your budget in a cohesive and coherent manner. Go through quickly how to apply for these particular schemes, and then run through quickly the documentation and evaluation side of things, which is more for people who have been successful in the application process, but just for you to think about what that might require from the outset, so that you're not caught needing to get more information that you maybe haven't been able to kind of capture through your project. And then we move into the Q&A at the end. And again, if there's any problems or anything, do feel free to hit a reaction or to send me a quick message directly if something happens that you can't see the screen or my sound disappears, just let me know. So in relation to the Arts Office funding opportunities themselves, as Jenny would have mentioned, the Arts Office established these schemes over a number of years ago, and they're really designed to support artists, arts participation, art form development, community groups, and generally creative engagement and arts festivals. So we do try and support as many of the people within the cultural and creative ecosystem in County Wicklow as is possible. As Jenny also kind of indicated, these schemes are part of a wider set of actions that we have developed over the years. We're trying to support the development of quality practice and public participation in the arts kind of throughout the county. And that could be through coaching supports, artist salons, one-to-one sessions. So there's a lot of different support mechanisms that are available through the Arts Office. But certainly we would hope that the support we give helps you to kind of put your best foot forward for public funding applications, both within County Wicklow and nationwide as well. And just a quick point to note, applications are welcome from all art forms, including but not limited to film, music, visual art, theatre, dance, literature, architecture, animation, performance, circus, the traditional arts, and drama. There is an option on the application form to hit other, and then to specify in case you work in multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary, or maybe more of an art form that's maybe more mixed media, or working with technology or AI, things like that. But certainly any and all art forms are available. And we would really like to see a nice mix of things coming through. So just moving on then to the next kind of slide. So this is just a quick overview of the different schemes. So as Jenny mentioned, there are 3 schemes that are available for funding in 2026 through the Arts Act funding. And that's the funding that comes from the Arts Council, and it is distributed via the local authorities. So it's the Artist Award Scheme, and that's very much around the individual artist. And that's really designed to try and support professional practicing artists to develop or realize a particular body of work, or to undertake professional development, possibly working with a mentor, undertaking a place on a course, some extra study, things like that. The maximum funding available for applications in that stream is up to €5,000, although I would note that awards are often made for lesser amounts than what has been requested, and that's purely to try and enable as many artists as is possible to receive funding. So even though we are kind of saying that the maximum funding is €5,000, if you're thinking about a project proposal, bear in mind that you may be awarded an amount lesser than that by the assessment panel. And that's no kind of judgment on your application. It's purely to try and get as much funds out to as many people as is possible. The Artist and Community Collaboration Award Scheme, then, that's really around supporting the collaborative nature between artists and community groups and trying to engage in arts programming, exploring different ways of creativity and interaction, exchanging ideas, and trying to embark on new learning journeys. Professional artists and community groups are invited to apply for that scheme. It can be one or the other who is the lead applicant on the application, but there must be a very strong sense of collaboration between both partners before application stage. And we'll touch on that later in terms of the letters of support and other information that we would like to see in particular reference to that scheme. The maximum funding available for projects funded through that scheme is €5,000. And then finally, the Arts Award, the Arts Festival Award Scheme, that's really trying to kind of support festival development plans and our programs. This is more for kind of established festivals already, seeking to maybe do a specific audience development program, work on new and kind of innovative programming, or work with other artists. And given the nature of arts festivals and the kind of the amount of budget required, the maximum funding available under that particular scheme is up to 15,000. But similarly, it may be a case that you don't receive the full amount that you've requested, purely to try and spread the financial support across as many festivals as is possible, but without being detrimental to your initial proposal. So just moving on to the next slide. So in relation to eligibility of the different schemes, the Individual Artist Award Scheme is open to professional artists at all stages of their careers, that are either from originally County Wicklow or have been living in County Wicklow for the last 3 consecutive years. So that could be emerging artists, mid-career, well-established, or like long-term practicing. So that is really, that's the only kind of residential kind of criteria for that one. The Artist and Community Collaboration Scheme, that's slightly different in that the community group must be based within County Wicklow and the project must take place in County Wicklow. Artists that we would like to see working together, ideally they would also be from County Wicklow, but we understand that you may have a previous connection with an artist who's based outside the county kind of border. So as long as the work is taking place within the county and for the benefit of the people in County Wicklow, that's okay. But as I mentioned, written confirmation from both the artist and the community group of the real firm commitment to the proposal must be obtained in advance of applying. That's really important, that we have a clear idea and sense that the proposal that's been put forward has been fully considered by both partners, and there's a full awareness of the commitment that's required to deliver the project to its best kind of success over the duration of time. And like that, any licenses or permissions that you might need for that project must be sought and approved in advance of applying. If you're working in maybe a public realm setting, or if you want to do some kind of activity outdoors, either you need to kind of contact, the venue that you want to kind of work in or work in front of the relevant municipal district, just to kind of get any and all permissions that might be required, because we really don't want a scenario whereby the project is really sound, it scores really well with the assessment panel, but then possibly due to delays with getting permissions, the timeline for the project kind of runs away from you, and it gets difficult then to try and deliver the project within that 2026 kind of period. And then finally, the Arts Festival Scheme, as I mentioned, is open to established arts festivals that do take place in County Wicklow and demonstrate a strong track record of delivery. There will be specific questions within that application form that require information on previous audience numbers and previous successes, programming, and then that kind of really helps the assessment panel determine how receiving the award next year will help benefit the festival or help grow or help kind of move into a new audience engagement kind of area. So moving forward. So this is the tips for kind of application writing. What I will say at this point as well, I have the deadline in the top right corner of all of these slides. So hopefully everyone remembers 5th of February, 2026. That's the main thing to kind of bear in mind in relation to your application. We've went live with the funds before Christmas this year to try and give people a bit more time to think about the project, think about your proposals, any kind of collaborators or people who you might want to get support of and have time to kind of work towards that. These tips that I'm going to kind of run through now, these are relevant both for our own opportunities within Wicklow County Council Arts Office, but also generally. So hopefully this is of some kind of use and guidance for any type of application or grant process that you might undertake, whether it's with the Arts Council, Creative Ireland, Create, any other kind of funding body. So hopefully it does, it's of use for everybody. I think the main thing when you're thinking about an application is really to look at, do you have a strong project idea that really clearly aligns with what the award guidelines and criteria are? As we've touched upon, the different schemes of different criteria in terms of it's for an individual artist trying to develop their practice, it's for a strong collaboration between an artist and a community group, and then also for the arts festival, then it's a new kind of development phase of a previously established scheme or previously established festival. The main thing is really to review the guidelines and criteria. All of the guidelines are available on the Wicklow Arts Office funding opportunities page. And again, all links will be attached. They're embedded in this presentation and will be circulated after this as well. So really review the guidelines and really make sure that the project idea that you have or the proposal that you want to undertake really aligns with that particular scheme. Because the assessment panel want to award funding. They want to see the best possible proposals coming forward and really helping them to have that proper sense of what it is you're trying to achieve really would work well. With that, providing clear, concise answers to the questions that have been asked is essential. And it might seem fairly obvious, but in terms of the questions, they're there to try and offer you the best opportunity to put your own kind of your best foot forward with the application. But you should always kind of remember as well that it needs to be kind of very clear. The assessment panel, as Jenny said, they are an independent panel, so that we provide all the information to the panel to review. So you should kind of bear in mind that the panel may or may not have a specific connection to County Wicklow. They will all be from an arts practitioner or a creative manager background. So they do have that experience, which is why they're on the panel. But you should answer your questions as if you're speaking to somebody who doesn't know anything about your practice, doesn't know anything about your previous work, and really try and explain to them as clearly as is possible, as if you're talking to somebody who doesn't know anything about what you do, to try and make sure that the panel have as much information as they need to review, because you can't assume that they will have prior knowledge of your work or your experience or anything like that. So do try and provide clear, concise answers to all the questions that are on the application form. Linking in with that, then, there should be really clear outcomes in relation to the answers that you're putting forward. Who benefits from the proposal? If it's yourself as an individual artist, how is it going to develop your practice? What might change as a result of you receiving the award? How will you measure what that change might look like? Similarly, with the community collaboration, it is those questions around what is the clear kind of impact on the participants or the community group or the audiences who might be engaged as a result of your proposal. So it's to be really clear about, if you receive the funding, what change will have happened by the end of it and how you'd be thinking about kind of measuring that impact. And I'll touch more on that piece in relation to the evaluation towards the end of the presentation. Similarly, in relation to an audience engagement plan, this is probably more relevant for the Arts Festival scheme or possibly the community collaboration scheme. If you're thinking about engaging audiences, how are you going to reach the audiences? How are you going to involve them in that? It's to try and think about, what it is that you're going to be able to kind of share with people, how you're going to be able to get them informed or bring them along with you on that journey. So it's just to be really clear that if you're making reference to something, always have some kind of backup within that as well, just so that the assessment panel can see, they've thought about what it means to develop an audience or they're trying to target a specific demographic group. They know exactly how they're going to approach it, whether it's through social media plans, targeted marketing, newspaper advertisements, whatever that might be. It's just to really give the assessment panel as much information as you can so that they can make a very well-rounded decision on the applications that have been submitted. In relation to the budget, we really need a detailed, realistic and feasible budget that lists all of the items, costs and services. It does mention in the guidelines some ineligible expenses such as alcohol costs, hospitality costs, etc., and capital assets. So do have a look at the guidelines to see what are ineligible expenses, so that when you're compiling your budget, you haven't accidentally put something in that may or may not deem your application ineligible. So just always bear in mind to kind of give the guidelines a good read before you start looking at pulling together all of your information. In relation to evidence of capacity, that's really for the assessment panel to determine, is the artist, is the community group or the arts festival, do they have the relevant experience and the relevant partners who are all working together? And then in the area for the arts festivals, the sufficient governance and kind of constitution and procedures to really be able to deliver on the proposal and deliver on the project. And that's really to try and let the assessment panel know that there is a success base in the past, and that should kind of follow through for the future. Or if you have experience in a different area, but those are transferable experiences to the new type of work that you want to do, really evidence that in your application form so that it's very clear for the panel, okay, well, they're coming from a different background and they're moving into a new area. That's okay because they've outlined what skills or what kind of experiences they previously have that should be relevant for the new area moving forward. In terms of a clear timeline or a phased delivery plan, if that's applicable for you, the timelines for this, the deadline, as I said, is the 5th of February. We would hope to notify everybody of their application outcome by the end of February. So you have most of next year to kind of work on your project delivery, but it's just to have a clear timeline kind of noted in your application form as well. In terms of that evaluation plan piece, that's in relation to kind of that measurement of impact and what would have changed as a result of having received funding through one of the three schemes. There could be a variety of different feedback ways. It could be independent surveys. It could be participant or audience numbers. There could be case studies in relation to the work that you've maybe done or a change model. And also, we would like to see the appropriate accreditation for Wicklow County Council on that. I will expand on the evaluation as we move through to a dedicated slide on that. The next point is very crucial. Strong letters of support that show real commitment and relevance to your proposal. And this is an area that we see occasionally where some applications might fall down in that the letters of support that have been submitted don't accurately kind of capture the amount of work or engagement or collaborative work that will be required to deliver the proposal successfully. And it's really just, again, about trying to show the assessment panel that any and all mentors, collaborators, community groups, support systems that you're going to rely on during the delivery of your project, whether it's an individual artist award, a collaborative scheme, or the arts festival itself, that anyone who you're going to be relying upon has a clear and full understanding of what their commitment to the proposal is. And it really kind of shines through in letters of support that they're fully on board, that this proposal has been either collaboratively worked on together, or they have the full support of that person to kind of support you in delivering that proposal. If it's a case that you're concerned about letters of support not being strong enough, you could always draft your own letter of support and offer that to either your collaborating group or your mentor or whoever it is that's going to be supporting you on the proposal. You could draft a template for them to give them the full sense of what it is that you're going to be doing, what exactly it is you're asking them to support you on. And if they're happy with that, they could sign the name to it. So that means that you've given them as much information as they need to be able to sign off on the letter of support. In relation to your supporting CV, we do ask that a CV is submitted no longer than 2 pages long, in addition to high quality examples of your past work. But this should really support your specific proposal. I know it can be very difficult to try and kind of trim down very extensive CVs with lots of experience across your years of work within your careers. But it is around trying to support your specific proposal. If you're an individual artist looking to do, a specific visual arts kind of project, if you have performing arts background, it's probably not as relevant for that. So you could just put in any and all reference to the specific visual art component that would help the assessment panel understand why it is that they have a strong CV in that area. And then similarly, the high quality examples of your past work would refer to that specifically. So it's, and you're going to keep me hearing me kind of ramble on about this. It's all about trying to provide as much concise, relevant information to the assessment panel as is possible. What they are looking to see is that there's a strong application form in its entirety, and then the supporting information, which is the CV, the high quality images of your previous work, and any letters of support that you might be submitting in addition to your budget. They basically back up the strength of your application form. So that's kind of where, they really want to see very specific examples of the work that you've done in the past. And if you're moving into a different type of art form or different type of work, you could show some in development imagery in addition to previously completed work to kind of show the journey that you want to go on. But it really is around trying to put your best foot forward. And the reason why we limit the CV to 2 pages, and you're only able to upload up to 5 high quality images of your previous work, purely because the assessment panel have a lot of things to review and to go through. So they need to be able to look at the application form in its entirety, and they will give the supporting documents as much review and time as they possibly can, but the bulk of it needs to be in the application form, and the supporting information then backs up what you have put forward in the application. Something that might seem kind of a bit redundant, but do try and proofread all of your documents. There are a number of word counts in the different application forms. The system will have a kind of a small check. So as you're going through the system, always do kind of bear that in mind. Some people might prefer to work offline on a Word document. That's completely fine. But just make sure that you kind of test the system to understand how it works. Sometimes when you copy and paste from different systems, the text can kind of act a bit funny. So just definitely dip into the platform. It's an online platform called Submittable. Again, the link is on the Wicklow Arts Office Funding Opportunities page. And just kind of have a bit of a feel for the system. If you wanted to do that in the next couple of weeks, it's probably a good idea to get used to what it is. And just check that all of the mandatory questions that you have an answer for those, just to make sure. And it's a good idea if you have someone who is, maybe a friend or a family member, to just read over your application. It's just good practice for someone else to read it, because you're so immersed in what you do, and you're so immersed in the work that you do with collaboratively with community groups or in your arts festival, and kind of what you're trying to achieve. So it is very much around getting someone else to have a different kind of pair of eyes on it, because they might see things that, oh, it's not really obvious what you mean by this, or this looks really good, but I feel it could be, stronger in a certain way. So it's just good kind of rule of thumb for any and all kind of paperwork or documentation. Get someone else to have a quick glance over it, and if they can fully understand what you're saying, happy days. You're kind of you're well there. And then finally, please try to submit your applications at least 24 hours before any deadline. That's purely because, with the best will in the world, people do naturally have, last minute kind of things pop up. So you might be trying to aim for the 5th of February for our application schemes. Something unavoidable might come in to your inbox that week, and suddenly you're under severe pressure. So do try and come in at least 24 hours before, if not even the week before. And please don't leave it to the last minute. The Arts Office are here to help with any kind of queries. We would ask that any queries come into us by the end of January, purely so that that last week is held for any possible technical difficulties, any issues like that. Because given that we have 3 schemes live at the same time, there will be a lot of correspondence that we will need to try and respond to in a timely manner. But like that, we also have other commitments and other things in our own diary. So it's just to try and not be in a situation whereby you need some guidance or need some support, and we are possibly committed elsewhere. So do try and get it in earlier the better. I noticed there are some questions coming in the chat, so I might just keep all of them. I hope there's nothing any urgent in there, but I will come back to all of the questions at the very end. So this is in relation to budgeting. So this is, hopefully you can see this. Now I know it's kind of small because we're on a screen, but again, this is available on the Wicklow Arts Office funding opportunities page. So this is a sample kind of budget form, and this is just kind of outlines the information that's asked to be submitted as part of your application. So what you see here is that we kind of ask you to run through what the income was in relation to any kind of proposal from, or in any kind of project from the 2025 kind of period, because that just helps give the assessment panel a bit of an understanding of your track record with managing a budget. And then like that, when you're projecting what your budget costs are going to be for 2026 in relation to your specific proposal, it just kind of reinforces your experience at having done something successfully this year. And it reinforces the message that this budget is feasible, it is deliverable, and it will be easily managed by you throughout your work in 2026. There is a template budget that is this format, and it's available to download in Excel format from the Wicklow Arts Office funding page. This is the only budget template that should be used when submitting your application. If for any reason, for access reasons, you find that difficult, do send a direct email to us at wao@wicklowcoco.ie. And again, that email will be visible later on. But preferably, this is the only budget template that will be used. It's to help the assessment panel have a very clear kind of cross comparison, that they can easily see the budgets and have a clear view as to what you're saying. If you use a different budget template, it can get a bit tricky for the panel who are used to seeing something in a certain manner. And then there's a different format presented to them, which might just make them ask more questions or not be able to read it as clearly as what this will. There's more tips on budgeting. So these are just some more tips in relation to our specific budget, which are probably applicable across a range of different schemes, kind of nationwide. Your income and expenditure totals must match. That seems fairly basic, but it's the kind of thing whereby if you're asking for a certain amount of money through the Individual Artist Award Scheme, the Artist and Community Collaboration Award Scheme, or the Arts Festival Award Scheme, there must be a clear indication of what the money in is then being spent on. So it must match. Now, if you're asking for funding from other sources, such as Arts Council funding and possibly other departments within Wicklow County Council, do kind of, map all that out. So it doesn't mean that you're only able to spend what we are potentially able to give you. You might have a bigger budget, that's fine, but it has to be clearly indicated where all of the different bits of income is coming from. That could be from, ticket sales and other kind of revenue sources as well. But anything that you project must be spent in terms of what your budget is forecasting. As I said before, we need a really detailed and realistic budget with all of the items, costs and services listed. We would prefer to see items broken down into as many line items as is relevant. So if you're putting in material costs for, any kind of application, breaking down the specific kind of costs per material, again, it helps the assessment panel have a more kind of full view as to what the budget is being asked for in terms of that delivery piece. Because if a budget states €2,000 for materials, but doesn't necessarily break it down, it can be hard for the panel to see, is that enough material cost? Is it slightly too much? If you're thinking of doing a large scale installation, that's probably not sufficient. It's to try and give them, again, as much information as is possible. Similarly, in relation to artist fees, please clearly indicate the all artist fees, both for yourselves or collaborating artists or people who you're programming as part of a festival. This should include the number of days or hours associated with that particular fee, and also the daily or hourly rate. Wicklow County Council, as does the Arts Council and all other local authorities, we are committed to the fair and equitable payment of artists. Applications that don't align with that commitment will be deemed ineligible. So that's where the clear breakdown of what the fee is for, how many hours does that entail, that will really help the panel to determine whether or not you are trying to do maybe too much work and you're underpaying yourself, or it hasn't been maybe fully kind of costed out. That's what we mean in terms of a realistic budget. It's really, are you trying to do a lot of work that isn't practically feasible within that parameter of, the €5,000 maximum for the Artist Award Scheme, and similarly the €5,000 maximum for the Artists in the Community Collaboration Scheme. There are some resource organisations such as Visual Artists Ireland, the Arts Council, Performing Arts Forum, Irish Theatre Institute, and others. I will list all of the links to those resource organisations because they have some guidelines and some information as to what they have benchmarked in relation to artist fees for a variety of activity, both for doing your own practice, for delivering workshops, for travel, etc. I will put all of that information in an FAQ document that will be published tomorrow on the Wicklow Arts Office website page. So that should help you when you're trying to kind of generate your budget and to make sure that you don't, unfortunately, be deemed ineligible because of an artist fee element like that. Similarly, if you expect to receive any in-kind support, you really must assign the in-kind support a financial value so that the contribution that is making to your overall proposal is clear. In-kind support refers to any non-monetary contribution towards the kind of success of your project. That could be free or reduced kind of venue hire if you're working within a venue. If you're collaborating with a venue, they could be offering marketing support. Someone could be willing to give you some equipment hire for free. But that all has a financial contribution to your proposal. And again, that's what helps the assessment panel determine whether or not the budget is feasible and practicable. If you have a budget, just for instance, that is €3,000 artist fee, €2,000 materials, and you're planning to do a large scale installation, in a public realm setting, unless there's clear evidence that equipment hire has been included from, a nice collaborator in the community, you've got insurance covered by the venue as where you're going to install your artwork, those kind of considerations. Otherwise, it's very hard for the panel to determine, have you fully costed out what the proposal actually is. So that's certainly where, if you have any in-kind support that you're thinking about, do assign it a financial value. Now, and again, if you have any questions in relation to any of this that are more specific or more kind of project specific, do feel free to drop me an email. I am available until the end of January for any kind of queries. So I'll just move on to the next one. So this is just a quick overview of how to apply. The main thing is really try and read all documentation carefully. There are guidelines available, as I said, on the website. They're only maybe 6 or 7 pages long. They're not too long in terms of reading through it, but I definitely would take the time to absorb the information that's presented there, in addition to having another reread of these slides that I will share, and also the FAQ document that I will produce online tomorrow. That's just to have as much information as you need to try and help your preparation phase for actually pulling together what your idea is, how to present it in the kind of the best way forward, and for the panel to get a full sense of what it is you're trying to do. Applications are only able to be submitted online, and that is via the Submittable platform. Some of you may have experience with that platform before. It's a fully online system. The first section asks for information about you as the lead applicant, whether that's the community group, the arts festival, or the individual artist. And then section 2 really kind of dives into the specifics around your project itself, asking for information about what it is you're going to do, how you're going to achieve it, what the outcomes will be, timeline, etc. And then the final section is all around the supporting information. That's where you will upload your budget, and you'll upload your CV, your past examples of your work, supporting letters, etc. So as noted there, you have hopefully sufficient space to enter all your details on the online form. What I will say is try and make sure that all of the content for your application is contained within the application form itself. The only kind of supporting documentation the panel would expect to see would be the CV, past examples of work, the supporting letters, and your budget, because they won't have the opportunity to review any additional PDFs or project content that have been uploaded as a support document. It really needs to be contained within the application form itself. And there are quite extensive word counts within the form that you should be able to get your information across if you're trying to be as clear and concise as is possible for the panel. And as I said, there is the budget template available on the Wicklow Arts Office website. That is the only one that should be used. But if you have an access kind of issue or concern, do get in touch with me directly, and we will try and help in whatever way we can. So just moving on then to the next bit. So this is in relation to the documentation and evaluation of projects. And this is for people who have been successful in receiving funding. But it's good to just kind of have a think about this type of content anyway. On the next page, I'll go into it in more depth. Really, for successful projects, they should be documented throughout the duration of the project. And that is because the final report that needs to be submitted to Wicklow Arts Office upon the completion of your project must include some key items, which are the below. There has to be an evaluation report that really includes a reflection of the overall experience from your perspective as an individual artist, from the perspective of both the artist and the community group that have been collaborating, or from the arts festival. So that really is kind of a high level view of how has it been for you as the recipient of the award. How has it kind of changed or impacted your practice or your community engagement or your arts festival delivery? And then there's another small kind of report that details how the award was spent, which is the project details, the kind of that cost and the time frame, just a high level overview of that. And importantly, an expenditure report. This really should detail a breakdown of costs along with all proof of expenditure. So that should be paid invoices, detailed supplier receipts to the value of the award. And bear in mind that receipts and paid invoices must be dated from after the time of accepting the award. If we are letting you know by the end of February that you've received the award, we wouldn't anticipate that we would receive any invoices or receipts for work carried out in January or February of next year, because that was work that was carried out separately to the project kind of activities. So just bear that in mind. All of this is laid out in a letter of offer for any successful applicant. So it is all kind of sketched out, but this is just to bear in mind for you as you're kind of thinking about, how would I go around kind of capturing all that information and keeping it to hand. Very importantly, a visual record, whether that's photography or video of the main stages of your project, and possibly at the initiation stage. If you're engaging with anybody in a public kind of capacity, a bit of interaction kind of content is always good. And maybe something at the end of the project when you've been completed. It could be the final output or a nice image of a final artwork that you've created, that kind of thing. Wicklow County Council might use that content for publicity in relation to the three funding schemes. So bear that in mind. If any individuals are captured in any of the images or video, signed image consent forms are required for that, because we may use it publicly. It may be attached to press releases. It could be on our social media platforms. It could be on our website. Similarly, for any content that you upload as part of your application, if there are individuals captured in that, make sure that you have permissions. Again, we don't need the actual consent form, but we need to know that you've got permission for that person if that image is then used to highlight you as a recipient of the award next year. And then finally, there will need to be some kind of evidence of your recognition or accreditation of the financial support offered by Wicklow County Council. We will offer a branding pack with the relevant logos and a small line of accreditation to be included in any and all collateral and printed material and kind of web information in relation to your project, just to make sure that we have that recognition that your successful project has been supported by Wicklow County Council's Arts Office. So this is a bit more of an in-depth kind of slide in relation to evaluation and kind of documentation. This is to try and help you in thinking around, if I'm asked the question as to how will I measure impact, how will I determine the success of a project, whether that's a personal project of my own artist development or practice kind of development, whether it's the engagement of a community group, whether it's a new audience kind of development strategy, or it's a new programming strand at an arts festival. You always need to think about what your project is trying to achieve, whether it is developing your own artistic practice, whether you're trying to work with a specific community group, or increase your audience reach or whatever your objective might be, you always should try and think about how will you evaluate the project? How are you going to determine the success of your project? And that might be both qualitative and kind of quantitative data in relation to the specific kind of different pieces. It could be data capture of audience members, like has your audience grown as a result of receiving this award? Maybe that's more relevant for the arts festival and kind of element. You could measure your audience numbers before and after. You could do a survey of audience members to kind of get their feedback for future events. You could examine your revenue streams and consider kind of other areas of growth. You might have generally participant feedback if you're working in the community collaboration kind of sphere. How might you capture feedback? Would you do a quick survey of participants before you engage with them to see what their understanding of arts practice is or what their interest level is? And then you could chart the difference or the impact that your project has had as you've gone through that process. There might be anecdotal evidence like testimonials you can capture. It's always really nice to kind of hear from yourself as the individual artist who's being supported, or the community group, or the participants or audiences that you're working with, to just have a nice sense of what the project has meant to them, what it has, kind of how they've benefited from working with you or engaging with you, or having something wonderful presented to them in a different way. So it really is trying to think about why you've selected that type of method of data capture and feedback and evaluation kind of mechanisms, and why is it important. The reason why it's important is it's a way for you to try and think critically about your project, think strategically about how you might adapt a project or adapt a proposal or what you're doing in a different way in the future, because you can build on previous success. So it's not designed to be particularly challenging or kind of difficult, but it is supposed to be a way for you to try and look at what has the success been, how am I able to kind of measure that, and then how will I be able to use that content and data to do something different in the future. So that's really that kind of piece around kind of evaluation. We will not be asking for such specific information in our evaluation report, but it is helpful for you to think about that, so that if you are working with a community group from the outset, think about how you're going to work with them to figure out, what the impact has been, what the success has looked like as well. And naturally, projects and proposals, it evolves over the lifetime. So things do kind of shift and change. That's all part of the learning process. So you might end up with kind of content that says, oh, this isn't what I really thought I was going to achieve or have as an output or have as an engagement thing. But that's okay, because it's all part of the process, but it's what you do with that information then in the future. So it's just something to kind of start thinking about in the back of your mind, that if you have that kind of content, how do you gather it? How will you then use it for the future as well?